Good evening and welcome to the Township Board of Trustees Committee of the Whole meeting for Tuesday, June 26th. And Ms. Lane, would you lead us in the pledge?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
With that, we'll ask for an approval of the consent agenda and the regular agenda.
So moved.
Support.
Any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? And we'll move to citizen comments. We'll start in the front of the room and work our way back. Okay, seeing no public comment, we will move on. We've included quite a few of the minutes in the consent agenda, so if the public wants to review those, we have quite a few of our organizations, and I'll just mention that Mr. Limita and Ms. Gilman, his administrative assistant, are in the process of scheduling meetings. What we're going to do is ask the outside entities like the individuals we have appointed to the Fire Commission, to the Parks and Rec Commission, to the Genesee District Library, McFarland Library, any of those groups, the Metropolitan Planning Alliance, to attend one of our board meetings so that they can give us an update and we can give them some ideas of where we see ourselves heading and the direction that we'd like to take with those groups. So we'll be scheduling those for upcoming board meetings throughout the year.
Right.
Awesome.
And I think the Parks and Rec Commission, you're going to get the minutes forwarded to us for that.
Yes, sir.
And so we'll have those included in our next meeting. So future positioning, what we wanted to do is, I know we had talked before, and I know Mr. Mansour had brought up that this fourth Tuesday meeting, really we wanted to focus it on, you know, our future positioning and where we want to direct the township. And where we see things going the next 5 to 10 years. We established a number of task forces, and we met on a couple of Saturdays in the past year or two, and came up with a number of priority areas that we had. We also then came up with some ideas or things that we envisioned maybe that we could. I think what our exercise was is that if we were to leave the area for 5 to 10 years and brought you back to the community, what you would like to see in these areas. And so we kind of did some visioning with regard to that. We need to probably take a look, first of all, or somewhere tonight, at who we have assigned to these task forces, because obviously we have Lonnie as, or Mr. Adkins, our new board member, and we need to include him on some of these. And I think also I'm going to remove myself from some of them and let our board members, I'll be in a number of them, but I think we also, Ms. Lane brought up today the idea of also amongst these groups appointing a person that would be the chair for your group, for your task force, so that you can report and also come up with meeting dates, what have you. And you know, some of these meetings could be conference calls on the phone. They don't all have to be face-to-face meetings, so that's another possibility. And if we keep it to 3 board members or less, we don't have to necessarily schedule it in advance and make it a meeting that we publicize, so right, which makes it easier to meet. And obviously these groups aren't meant to meet to take action. They're meant to come back to the board with initiatives and discussion. So I guess I'll open the discussion. We've got first on the list here, I'm not sure, Parks and Rec. Dennis, are these in any particular order as far as how they're listed, or is this just random as far as we've got Parks and Rec and then streets and roads? Or?
So
So initially, we had put a longer list together, then we force ranked them. Now it's been changed. We took out zip codes, and we had fire in there. The board asked to set that aside while we work through the millage, and then we'll see if that comes back out again. But these were the items that were selected by the board as the most important items that you guys wanted to make progress on during your term of office, and they were force ranked. Parks and Rec was number one, and
Okay.
so on down. So you guys have had the opportunity to come together. The notes were captured right from that Saturday meeting for the most part. So right underneath it, where you saw some of the goals that were thrown out there, like under Parks and Rec, to hold events for every season, to be fully funded, to work with the sports consortium. Those were all ideas that were captured on that Saturday. And then there was just a couple of strategies from each one. Some were discussed, some were put in there as examples. And I think, for the board's perspective now, you should take a look at all those items that are listed underneath there, basically kind of the goals or the vision that you guys came up with, and try to see if those are still relevant. Weed them down if you'd like to maybe 4 or 5 that you know that you maybe can accomplish or build a policy around, and then the strategies will come out of of how you want us to roll that out. One thing that would be critical for us from an administrative side is we're working through these, is if there's something that is near and dear to the board's heart or from a vision that you want to move forward, we're working into our 2019 budget now. So it'd be kind of critical to be able to convey that information to me at this juncture within the next 2 months, say, where I know that you want to allocate a certain amount of money, or you want to allocate some money towards one or other of the strategic objectives that you'd like to accomplish. That'd be helpful for me to know that before August.
Okay.
You want me to start?
Yeah, let's start with Parks and Recreation, and we've got a list there of probably about, about 11 items or 12 items, and probably a discussion on
I have four, I'm sorry.
on those items and figuring out which of them are priority.
I forwarded the audit report from Yo to the board. Also, Supervisor Bennett and Trustee Mansour received that. I have been sending the minutes to Trustee Mansour and to Supervisor Bennett to look through. There's one sticking point that one of the things that I really wanted to accomplish was the agreement with the 3 entities. And I know that right now we're kind of, I'm not sure where we sit on that. I had the commission do an exercise and write what they wanted to, their input, I should say, for the agreement, and I forward that to the board. And I'd like to see that, cleaned up, and maybe we could do some brainstorming on that. That's something I'd like to see. The other thing is that, as everyone, if they've read it, our director and assistant director have been working without a current contract. So that's what we're in the midst of doing that.
Who's in the midst of doing that?
The labor attorney
For the Parks and Rec Commission?
Parks and Rec Commission. So they're in the midst of going through that, I think, with
And that's their attorney?
Superintendent Limita. Are they, I know that Director Edson's been in contact with you about this. Are they using our labor attorney?
I don't believe so. I believe I don't know if this is their private attorney that
I think it was
Director Edson was
Goyette.
having it looked at, or if it went to the Parks and Rec Commission's.
It went to their their legislative branch of the commissions, working with the director, but I was told that they're working hand in hand with you.
I've had, they've asked me some advice on their agreements, but that's pretty much the end of it. I just encourage them that they should have agreements as far as what those agreements look like, because they're employees of the Parks and Rec Commission and not the township. I haven't weighed in on it as far as what that agreement should look like. That's more between the commission and them as employees.
I'm just thinking in terms of, the order of things, and I'm wondering if it behooves us to to look at the agreement amongst the three entities before we look at
Right.
the agreement of them doing an agreement with the director and the assistant director. I don't know, I'm just wondering if that would be the natural order of things, is to make sure that our agreement with the other parties is in place before we have somebody committing us to.
And Supervisor Bennett, is this gonna be open as a, kind of like a speaking workshop right now?
Well, I think, yes,
Okay,
our
so
committee of the whole is kind of a.
I agree with you. I hope everyone had an opportunity to look at what the commission, their recommendations, I should say, for the agreement. There's a lot of things in there that I absolutely do not agree with. Unfortunately, I'm not prepared to hand out one to everybody, but I know it should be in your emails. If it behoove the board, I would love to be able to sit down with Attorney Laddie and Superintendent Limita and go through the agreement and show what I think it would behoove us. And if anybody would like to join me in that, that would be great. And we could put together an agreement that way if that would satisfy the board and the task force.
Ms. Lane?
I agree with what Supervisor Bennett said. I don't think the commission nor the Parks and Rec director, unless they are just dealing with themselves and want to come and negotiate a contract with the township, city, and school board, but they shouldn't be bringing us what they want unless we're in a negotiation
I'm
position.
talking about the agreement between the city, the township, and the schools. I'm not talking about her contract.
Okay,
Her contract, the way that the agreement's written is that she's hired by the commission. We don't have hiring and firing.
no, but my concern is, Mr. Thomas, that when we started the Parks and Rec Commission back in the 70s with Director Creasy, his benefit package as part of the original agreement, his retirement, his salary and everything were paid by the schools. So until he left, we never even thought about it nor had to consider it. And so I think with a change then to where it isn't the school's contract with their employee, he was a teacher and a coach, it sort of didn't blend over as well as we might have wanted. And since now the city, the township, and the schools are the ones that are going to have to finance the employees of the Parks and Rec Commission, we should, in my personal opinion, have input to those contracts since we're going to have the liability.
Well, I'm not sure that's the case, but Mr. Limita?
What I'd like to just say to the board is that, I mean, one of the things that you have to look at if you're gonna start talking about that updated ordinance or whatever is that ordinance is in place to make sure it furthers your goals or your vision for Parks and Recreation. And so far, what the discussion's been is more day-to-day operations for the commission standpoint. And I don't want you to get bogged down on just managing the day-to-days or worried about those contracts. It's more about, for your strategic planning purposes,
Right.
is what's the vision for Parks and Rec to offer the best programs that are possible to the most number of people for the least amount of cost? Are we offering the correct programs? That kind of thing. And then your ordinance is there to support the ultimate goal of where you want to bring Parks and Rec to, not so much, like, I agree that there's some concerns with that ordinance. Number one, we've placed a great deal of authority with the Parks and Recreation Commission. And so I think there's some areas in there that need to be spelled out clearly to make sure from a liability standpoint, because we've got this great kind of a deal that was formed in 1970, but a lot of things have changed and a lot of labor laws have changed in 1970. We're a much more litigious society than we were in 1970. So I've got some concerns about that, but that ordinance should exist to further your ultimate goals of where do you guys want to bring Parks and Recreation to?
Yeah, I think, we're looking at three questions of what good for which people at what cost. And right now we're focused on how we're gonna do it. And we haven't even answered the question of what good for which people at what cost, really? And I think, you know, what you're saying, Ken, are necessary, and I know you're in the thick of it because you're on the board, but I think what we want to do is outline where do we want to go, and then we figure out, okay, well, this ordinance or this agreement with the three parties, does it fit with where we want to go? And what we need to figure out is where do we want to go over the next 5 years with our parks, and does our current plan fit that? You know, what we're looking at is the roadmap. We're going to figure out after we look at the roadmap of where we're going, whether or not the vehicle we have needs to be updated or changed to get us there.
Well, Supervisor Bennett, would it behoove me then, to behoove us as a task force and a board, for me to supply everybody with a copy of the strategic plan that was just updated a few months ago?
I think it'd probably be helpful, but I think what we're looking at here is, as a township board, is what do we think the priorities are for Parks and Rec? And then we take a look at the strategic plan and see if it matches what we think our people are asking for. And not that we have any greater vision than them, but just to see that.
I understand the vision of if money was no object.
Right.
You know, that was part of the exercise.
Mm-hmm.
And my quagmire is that I keep on coming back to the realities that the way that it was set up, it's a task that I'm having an issue doing because I am getting drawn back into, well, I'd love to build a new entrance to our park, Bicentennial Park. And a beautiful new, what we have now is not conducive to our vision of being a better community, a premier community. But I keep on getting pulled back into
By
the
who?
agreement.
By who?
Saying, the commission, and even when we talk, I'm like, well, you know, that'd be really slick if we could stock that pond with fish, and they have fishing derbies out there. How neat would that be? Next thing you know, I get back to, you know, we're running this, and who's responsible if somebody?
Well, that's going to be Mr. Lemata's job, because
So,
that's operations. But
It's such a fine line
yeah.
that I keep on
Mr.
getting.
Lemata?
So that's where I think, that's a great point that Trustee Thomas just made. If that was the vision for this board, like you guys all agreed that, you know, let's use that water feature out there. Let's make a fishing dock around it, stock it with fish, put pedal boats in there, whatever. If that was your vision, then, you know, I think that's kind of where I would agree that we formed this Parks and Rec Commission and we were like, well, then they can handle that. And as a board, we don't have to worry about that because now they're handling the Parks and Recreation, and they kind of took on a life and a vision of their own, and they had it out. They asked for your input during the master plan, and then they put a master plan together, and it rolls back out. Does that master plan fit your vision? And if it was as simple as one of those things, is one of your goals is, I'd like to see us use more of that water feature, or to put a wood boardwalk around it, or whatever. You guys can put that out as the vision, and then we're, as a township board, you guys are now telling Parks and Rec Commission, this is what we want to see happen, and we raised $250,000 for capital purchases, and that's one of the capital purchases we want. We want it in our capital plan, and start working towards it, because the information should be coming that way. It should be generated from you down, and certainly it comes both ways, because you're saying, what are your needs? And they say, I need all new fencing on the ball fields because it's neglected, or I need a new basketball court. And you guys say, okay, we agree, that needs to be fixed, but don't forget about the fish pond. That is one of our goals as a board, and that has to be built into your capital plan, and we want to know what year and you know, what kind of costs. You guys drive that. You drive the vision, and it's up to them then to figure out how they're going to deliver on that vision. And when they come back and present their capital plan and say, we're going to build this new lacrosse field, and we've got this other idea, and you say, that's fantastic, but when's the fish pond going to happen? Because that's what we want to see. We want to see your next 5-year capital plan for how you're going to spend that money. And I think that's the disconnect, where it hasn't been driven by you down to them. And that's where you guys want to take this, so you're not getting distracted by, well, we're not doing that, here's our plan. It doesn't work that way. They don't get to tell you the plan. You tell them what your vision is. you're financing it. You got $3 million to spend in 10 years out there. This is gonna be the best park that anyone's ever seen around here, but it's gotta capture what you guys wanna see based on what you're hearing from your constituents.
I think one thing that Mr. Mansur brought up at one of our prior board meetings was, you know, the signage. I mean, when you drive by, you know, something that the municipality is doing somewhere else, you see a sign that says, you know, hey, this upgrade that's going on here is funded by, you know, a millage that, and here's what's being upgraded right now. Pardon the dust while we upgrade our park. Here's what your millage is paying for. Sometimes they even have a you know, rendering of whatever the thing is that they're building. And I think that's important to let people know that, hey, this millage that you're paying into isn't just going into some bucket that's hidden from everybody. It's actually producing results. And I think
Tangible
we
results.
labeled that as, I think our board agreed that. So I think that might be something that we put on that list, that here's something, Dennis, that it was a priority. Was that a consensus of our board, I think, that we did something along those lines? But
So then that becomes one of our tactics or our strategies, is to make sure that we let the public know what the capital plan is, right? So the strategy underneath there, we get a new bullet point, and it's, you know, public education or public information through signage on the capital plan for Parks and Rec for 10 years.
And execution. Can I have a,
Yes.
just a minute? So, so we've had a couple of discussions here. One was kind of about operations of the commission amongst the three entities that sponsor it. And then, you know, kind of the other layer of it was the vision or the strategic layer. So, I mean, these two have to work together. I mean, it's not an either or. This board can't, you know, just focus on the vision and kind of abdicate on the operations piece, because they knit together so well. So I think Trustee Thomas, I mean, until we get the agreement ironed out between the three entities, it's going to continue to be a thorn, just like it turns out it is in the Fire Commission, turns out.
right.
So, so I agree we need to pursue the strategies here, but somehow we have to get that thing the other thing ironed out, so that we each feel like we're getting treated equitably, and we create the construct around what the commission can and can't do.
Well, I think, I agree it's gotta be a mutual thing, but I think what we need to do is come up with the ideas of what we'd like to see or envision it,
Absolutely.
so that when we craft that agreement, we say, well, how are we gonna do this? Because this is what we envision wanting to have happen. If we say that, let's say we take one of these things here was to work with a sports consortium for attracting high school events. I don't know, maybe the Parks Commission will say, no, that's not a priority for us. Well, when we're crafting this agreement, we need to know that, hey, there's a disconnect on one of these things. So I think if we come up with what we see as our priority list, and now we go to the commission, and correct me if I'm wrong, but we go to the Parks Commission and say, well, here's a list of the things that we would envision happening over the next 5 years. And they say, well, we don't see that. Now we gotta figure out something different, right? I mean,
So just a quick follow on there.
sure.
So, well, I think we're getting caught a little bit here between the urgent and the important. I mean, it is important for us to do the vision thing and get that all squared away, no question about it. We need to have
Right.
our view. But the urgent thing, maybe because they're executing contracts, because they're agreeing to things that have real impact on our budgets and on their budgets, that's something that we, you know, we need to somehow get laser beam focused on and just knock it out, just get it done.
The agreement between the three.
Yeah, that's just my viewpoint. Thank you.
Okay. Mr. Atkins?
Yeah, I agree 1,000% with Trustee Mansour. I think, you know, the vision and the urgent is the, you know, we had a taste of it with fire, still do. And I absolutely agree, without that updated ordinance, I can't see, you know, to what Trustee Thomas is going through, I think you could get pulled down into a rabbit hole here without, I think you can still go into it with the township's vision of how they want to allocate our taxpayer dollars, but
I think what they're doing right now seems to be locking up, or sounds like they're locking into some employment agreements to kind of, the cart before the horse kind of thing. So I really think, in my opinion, that strategy is the urgent part of it, is to get that agreement in place, whatever that may look like.
Okay. And I understand, I mean, we don't want to let something fester. Any thoughts, Mr. Guzak?
Well, we've talked about that agreement for quite a while, and we haven't done anything on it. So, and then we're allowing them to do it because we're kind of on the outside looking in. I don't know how much authority we have to actually, do that. I know we talked about changing some of it, but we said we're not part of that entity, so we can't. Is that correct, David?
No, we're 1/3 partner in the Parks and Rec Commission.
But I mean, as far as the commission, they're doing stuff in the commission that we have no idea what they're doing, and we can't really control that. We can maybe focus on these projects, but we can't change because that commission's telling them what to do.
Well, you can't, as far as day-to-day operations of
Right.
Parks and Rec, wherever they happen to be located, you're not gonna be able to interfere with that.
Right.
They're not those folks aren't employees, but we are a third partner in that. And-
Liable for it.
And right, to a third, to the extent that we're a partnership. The other thing to consider, though, is I think all of these issues are also issues for those other three partners. And it may well be, for example, that the schools doesn't consider itself a viable 33 1/3% partner, even though that agreement indicates that they are. And so it would be, I think, depending on how you guys decide to handle this, I think a discussion or dialogue about that agreement and whether it fits everybody at this particular time, and then whether it fits them in the future or us in the future going forward, is something is a discussion you can have while you're still trying to figure out what is your vision for, and your focus, frankly, it looks to me like on this list, you're mostly on Creasy Park. So I think those two things can happen at the same time. But I agree with Mr. Lemata, and I agree with Trustee Thomas, that there's an underlying current of uncertainty, and I believe once we address it in a tactful way, I think that will be a concern for the city and also the schools. But it doesn't have to be the main focus. It can be a parallel running issue. So, and just for an example, if Trustee Thomas said, well, I want Laddie and Lemata to talk about this with me, maybe there could be, maybe we can have discussions with the city and the schools that don't really get in the way of your strategic planning. Except to the extent that you're gonna say, well, do we want to do this if we're not going to be controlling that? That will always factor into your issue.
There's obviously other municipalities that have mutual agreements similar to this for parks or what have you.
No,
Necessarily assume
Mr.
that.
Bennett.
None of this
Mike?
kind
Mr. Supervisor, I'm sorry.
Yes.
There are no other places in the state of Michigan where you have a three-way agreement that works as this one has. That's historically been the rule, and people come to us and have said for years, how do you get the three of you to work together? And we could always say, from the 70s on, it started as a three-way, it's worked that way forever, and now, as you're all saying, you want to look at it again and refresh it. But different communities have come here, and there are no three-way partnerships like this that are working anywhere in the state of Michigan.
Okay.
Mr. Thomas?
Traverse City has a four-way agreement with, they've got there is none in this county, absolutely none in this county. I've spoken with pretty much every park director, but getting back to this, I think.
So it sounds like we get a consensus that the agreement is one of the priorities that we have
Agreed.
with the three.
And Attorney Laddie, I know that I'm pretty sure, did everybody get the outline that I sent? What I thought the agreement, me personally, as just a a layperson, I sent everybody my ideas on the agreement, along with Parks Commissions. And full disclosure, I want everyone to realize that our resident back there has helped me out tremendously on some of this. For historical, Mr. has helped me tremendously on the historical aspect of Parks and Rec, and helped me through, realize I was born in '68 and this was done in '70. So he's really filled me in, so has Attorney Laddie and Lemata, and of course Supervisor Bennett. So we haven't been going into this blind by any means, but everyone should have a copy of the original agreement, the proposed agreement from the from the Parks and Rec Commission, and then my outline.
I don't have that, I don't believe.
I don't think I do.
Attorney Laddie, can you forward that to everybody?
Absolutely.
Because I know that you helped me with that.
Yeah, no, I'll be happy to do that.
Well, I think what we need to do is look at what do we want our process to be for looking at that agreement then, if that's the it sounds like that's the priority right now amongst the board. Is that the understanding? Am I getting the right understanding here that that's, I mean, I knew it was one of the top priorities. I'm not walking in this blind, but.
Yeah, I think the main concern was that the schools doesn't really realize that they're 1/3 liable on this whole thing. And that's why, they might want to assist us, but they might not want to be a third anymore, because if you've got expenses that commission is doing, and we're liable for it, because they don't have the funds for it, we're funding it.
If it's appropriate, Supervisor Bennett, I will supply everyone with, Attorney Lady's gonna do those. And then I will supply everyone with a copy of the strategic plan that was updated in November. And we could go from there, so I could, the three of us, Trustee Mansour, myself and you, we can work and do our vision of the fishing pond and the new opening. But everything on this list is already being looked at.
Okay. Mr. Mansur?
Yeah, so I was just going to suggest that, again, we're in the mindset of adding bullets here, but, I mean, maybe we should just put on here as a bullet, a joint agreement that represents the current township priorities. Maybe that's,
I like that.
maybe that's a way to kind of fold it in here.
Let's do that. You have that, Ms.
And-
Lane?
Yeah,
Yes.
and,
Agreement that represents the current township's priorities.
yeah,
Joint agreement.
yeah,
Joint
joint agreement, that's right.
Between the three entities.
Yep, and, yeah, the current township priorities and employment contracts.
And the thing about that agreement is, talking, Mr. Guzak, or I don't know who it mentioned that, the schools may not realize that they're a third partner in this, and maybe one of the entities doesn't want to be a third. Maybe they just want to loan their buildings or what have you. And
Yeah.
I mean, we need to have that discussion with
Sure.
those entities.
So if I may, what are the two school representatives on this commission?
One is Lieutenant Matt Simpson from our police.
Who?
I thought he was at the
No, he's at large.
Lieutenant Matt Simpson was appointed by the schools.
But I thought he was an at-large. I thought we had a couple of at-large
No,
members.
he was appointed when the other person was removed. And Lieutenant Matt Simpson's he's the school. And the other one is
Is
Hester?
it just
Or
one person or two people?
Two, Macco. I think it's Jason Macco. But I'm pretty sure,
Okay.
Who's
Well,
the
let's see.
person at large?
I'm wondering if it's on their
Supervisor.
website, but
I never met the guys.
I didn't want to
well, Matt was
drag
definitely.
this down a rat hole. My suggestion was just kind of along the lines of let's figure out who these people are, then maybe have a session with them.
right.
Yeah.
And one of the other things that falls under Parks and Rec is the senior center.
Yeah, excellent.
And that's another thing that I'd like to briefly touch on.
Which we don't have anything under,
We should have something
Nothing.
on that.
I mean, we have affiliated facilities, but there's no bullet points with regard to
Senior center.
our seniors, and with the aging population that we have, it probably should be an area of priority.
The interesting thing about our senior center is that it is through Parks and Rec. And I was told that the Parks and Rec in other communities always have the senior center, and I found out that is absolutely not true. It's a standalone entity that we received county dollars for. You know, that is a county program, and we are ranked, and the amount that you receive is done by the quality of the programs and the structures that we have. And we are ranked #1 in the county in our senior center. We're ranked the highest phase to receive the most monies. But that's another thing that I would really, really, really like to look at once we get the agreements done, is I guarantee the schools have no idea that they're a third responsible for the senior center.
So
Yeah.
Supervisor Bennett, I wonder if Trustee Thomas has a recommendation for a bullet that wants us to recognize the senior center as a focal point for enriching our seniors' lives, something like that.
That's something I probably need to speak to Mr. Limita
What
about.
was your suggestion, Mr.?
It's a
Looking-
standalone entity.
Yeah, well, looking out, just like all these are vision things, I say we want a senior center that's recognized as a focal point for enriching our seniors' lives.
I like that.
And it sounds like they're doing a good job if we're getting the most money now, so they're doing a good job.
Well, it's a matter of, I think, population that we get the most
Yeah.
money. It isn't
Which
based on
helps.
merit.
It always
It's based on population.
Oh, I thought it was.
No, it's actually, it's by program.
It's
Yeah, that's what he said,
participation.
program.
Yeah.
It's
We have better
participation in the
programs than
program.
anybody else.
We have the most population too.
Participation show would help there too.
I got you.
Okay.
As far as,
Mr. Chair,
Yes.
let me speak on
Yes.
that. It has nothing to do.
and actually, Mr. Massey is actually on the state commission for, what, was it VAAA?
Yes, and, but I was gonna comment, it's not based on population,
Isn't it?
no.
What's it based on?
It's based on, what the committee, right now it's based on what the director decides,
The director of the county senior
of the
program?
senior millage.
The director on the county level,
Yeah,
you're
on the
saying?
county level.
Do you know who that is?
Lynn, Kowalski,
Okay.
Konoski,
So they get to decide
yes,
how much money each area gets?
yes.
Okay. As far as the Parks Commission, you said that Sergeant Matt Simpson replaced, or is it Captain Matt Simpson now, right?
Lieutenant.
Lieutenant.
He replaced Brad Hester?
No, Brad, I think Brad
Is still there.
is at large. My computer just crashed.
So Brad Hester's at large. Jason Macco was a Board of Education appointee.
And then,
Paula Noss is from the City Council.
yep,
Also from the City Council is Jake Mengel.
yep.
From the Township, we have Tom Pettit, who we need to meet.
Yeah, that's right, Pettit.
Is Tom active on that board?
He's our treasurer
So he's active on that board.
Has been for
Yeah.
when
years.
he's not in Florida.
Okay, so he spends part of the year in Florida.
Correct.
Ken Thomas, and then Gary Green. He's a representative of the Board of Education. So the two Board of Education representatives are Gary Green and Jason Macco.
No, Matt's Board of Education.
Also, he replaced one of those two?
Green, he replaced
Okay.
Green. Yeah, Matt just texted me, yeah,
Okay.
he's cool.
All right, so they do have two people on the board for the Board of Education. So what would be a logical process for us to, Mr. Thomas said that he's going to send out to us, or to Mr. Limita, to get the suggested changes that the board, the commission, Parks Commission had for that agreement.
Attorney Laddie has that.
Okay.
I'll send it out.
Okay. But I'm just trying to think through, Mr. Laddie or Mr. Limita, any thoughts on, I mean, you've worked on agreements similar to this, Mr. Laddie, what would you suggest?
My instinct would be to talk to the general counsel for the city and general counsel for the schools, and just let them know that we are looking at the agreement, that the Parks Commission's looking at the agreement, and that we have some concerns about the allocation of, well, first of all, about the growth and how things have changed slightly as far as liability is concerned, and also about whether or not we're allocated properly as far as responsibilities, and whether or not they're aware of the notion that we're 33 1/3% partners in this, and what are their thoughts regarding potential changes. Now, they'll have to go back to their respective clients
Right.
and begin the discussion, but that would be my instinct. Now, if Mr. Lemata has a better idea, I'm perfectly happy to participate whatever way you want.
I think that makes sense. I think, like I said, previously, a lot's happened since 1970s when this agreement was forged. When you think about the liabilities that are associated with this ongoing enterprise, including ongoing post-employment costs, I think that it just needs to be spelled out more. Those things weren't really factored into the 1970s, and I think that as time's gone by, and certainly the commission, if you read the agreement, was given or granted the authority by the three entities to be able to make those decisions on their employees, but they have obligated us as a entity, as a partner in that agreement, to some long-term costs, and I think those need to be very clearly spelled out so that everybody's in it with their eyes wide open on what they're responsible for, because I think that it may be that especially the schools may be saying, whoa, what do you mean we're 33 1/3 partners in ongoing liabilities for something? I think it should start with council.
Okay, I would agree that I think this is going to be a legal document, and I don't pretend to be an attorney nor ever want to pretend, and I think we need to start the ball rolling amongst our legal person, which is Mr. Laddie, and theirs, to get the discussion going. I don't know, does that sound like a good idea to go that route?
Great.
Okay, so we'll ask Mr. Laddie to be in touch, and I'll let them know we're looking at that. Mr. Lemata?
And so Supervisor Bennett, before you guys move on, so what I'm looking at with the way this document for your strategic plan is coming together, those diamond-shaped bullet points were really goals, right? So you've got the topic is Parks and Recreation and affiliated facilities. The goals right now I have are, number one, are the joint agreement that represents current township priorities. The number 2 goal is the senior center's focal point for enriching seniors' lives in the township or in the community. These other ones are goals that, I mean, we can pull off there for now, or they can stay on here. Then under your strategies become, evaluate and update the ordinance for the joint Parks and Rec department. So the tactic then, another subgroup under that will be the tactic that says we've turned it over to civil council, who's going to talk to the respective councils for the other things, and put a time frame on there so you know when it's going to come back. So I'll restructure this document. You can kind of do each one of these topics in that format. So you're looking at goals, strategies, tactics, and then down to who, what, when timelines. And that will kind of help focus and keep us moving.
I think, and I think some of this can be done simultaneously, right? I mean, for example, the signage that we had a consensus that we would like to let our residents know what we're spending money on, and so that they realize that this money is being well spent and they can give us their input.
So if this is a communication tool, can we use the money that whatever that fund money was that we used to enhance our AV here?
Absolutely.
Yes.
So there's budget, I mean, we can kind of work off of that a little bit too.
And
Just a
maybe
thought.
even put it, when we have a next mailing of some sort, maybe
Sure.
put something in there that kind of gives a flyer on what,
what we're spending the money this month on.
or this year, what the Parks and Rec millage upgraded, and maybe some pictures and what
That'd be
have you.
awesome.
Some of the things that are on this diamond list, these are already being done.
Tell us which ones are being done.
Well, the sports consortium, that's being done
By who?
by the commission. It's part of the strategic plan. They do that. They've been working.
Who are they working with then?
Well, they have all those different tournaments, so they're
Yeah,
working all those
what
different
is,
tournament
what's the
directors.
president of the chamber in Flint?
Tim Herman?
Herman, yeah, Tim Herman. they've been actually meeting with the chamber and with Tim Herman, and they have a representative from the chamber.
Have them give me a call, I'd like to participate in that.
Because I took your idea with, when you and I were speaking in our last task force meeting about the softball tournaments and using some of the Flint Convention Bureau monies, and they've done it. So they've been dealing with Tim,
Where's that money going then?
well, that's what they're working on, it's part of the plan they are
Have
working
them
on.
give me a call if you would, and I'd like to
Okay.
participate in that.
Okay,
What's that?
have Kay call you, or the
Well,
person in charge of
whoever's in
that?
charge of that consortium.
Okay. And then they were, the other stuff with the amphitheater, I mean, if that, I can bring this up. The free concert and community events, that's happening in the parks already.
That's
What
not
are
in
they
our
doing?
park, that's in the, we're talking
In
the
the city.
bicentennial, we want like some type of, not in the city park.
Well, with the Parks Recreation Facilities, I just took it as the whole Parks and Rec Commission.
Yeah, we're not gonna be able to tell the city what to do with their
Right,
properties.
we were trying to expand, you know, our
Well,
Gracie
but,
Park to have a.
I just wanna throw this out there, but the concerts in the parks, that's put on by the.
So I guess what I wanna make sure of is that we're not developing a list, that we come up with a list of things and then, oh, well, we're doing this. And basically, we just hand our list over and say, okay, well, I guess we're
So
not
what you're talking about basically, Supervisor Bennett, is like, you know, I would love to see a new entrance, and I know a lot of our residents want to see a new entrance at Bicentennial Park. So that would be like one of our highlights that you and I.
So
would
let's say
discuss.
that we said that's a priority, then tomorrow we see somebody put a couple of potted plants out there. Well, got that done. Well, we got a sports consortium, we had a meeting and we met with Flint Chamber, we did that already. What I'm envisioning is, hey, this is the township's,
Well,
program.
And it does say Township Park.
Yeah, and that
It's
we
not-
would like to be a part of, you know, communicating Mr. Lima to, just like, you know, on the signage, we're gonna, look at that and how we're gonna fund it. Not that we wanna be involved in the operation, but we don't wanna develop something that somebody's just gonna, hey, let's hurry up and do this because, you know,
Because we're
otherwise
ready.
township board's gonna do it. So I think these are thoughtful things that we're gonna take some time to develop. But I'm curious that some of these things that we're listing off here that they're already doing, because when we came up with this list a couple months ago, we were unaware of any of them. But,
Mr. Chair,
yes,
I have a question. We're talking about, window dressing at the entrance.
yeah,
Who's in charge of this?
of bicentennial.
Yes.
Well, the Parks Commission, pretty much operates the parks. I mean, so right now, you know, I don't know that we've given them any directive on how we want that to look. It's kind of where we're at. We need, in the agreement, to spell out, I think, a little bit better on the facilities, maybe. I don't know, Mr.
Well,
Lay.
that's a good
what's
question. I
it-
mean, we own the park, right? So we're gonna have, we have final say on that. We have veto power on the side.
Right.
But whether or not that, maybe that's a topic that Parks and Rec as a commission can discuss. Maybe there'll be a common theme between all the different parks in the three municipalities. I don't necessarily see that as a roadblock to letting them throw in some ideas about that. But ultimately, it's our park, and we're gonna decide what goes there and what doesn't go there. Similarly, though, I mean, we share the senior center, so we've got to split our input, and then the schools are gonna be in charge of the appearance of their facilities.
Part of what our issue, I think, and Mr. Lima mentioned this, is that, you know, I'm not sure that passport, you know, some people may ask, and I've heard people, well, why are you guys micromanaging, you know, and getting into that? Well, in reality, what it is that I think maybe this board, and I don't mean this to be derogatory, but we're taking our job seriously, and that we don't just want to hand off the pieces to the puzzle to somebody else and say, you guys put them together. We're taking our job seriously, and that we want to be involved, and maybe it's more involved than what some people would like us to be. But I think we're taking our fiscal responsibility and our elected position of I mean, residents want this township to be successful and be a premier community. And we can't just appoint people to a commission and say, there, you take care of it. You know, the only time you need to come to us is when you need more money. And I think we want to get away from that kind of thing, and we want, it's going to be more of a collaborative effort. And I'm not sure we've had that collaboration, and I'm not blaming anybody but ourselves, because just like we talked about, we need to have these commissions come meet with us, and it might be a working meeting like this and not just give us a report and we say, okay, thank you very much. It's got to be more of a collaborative thing where we talk about, hey, that entrance to our park, we want to address that up. How do we do that? And let's collaborate. We need to put some money towards it. Okay, let's figure out that. Mr. Lavy?
But this is really good for that purpose. You guys are getting out ahead of just getting a budget that either has things that are done or things that are gonna be done that you don't know about. This is, and Mr. Lehman, I hit on this, your direction to the Parks and Rec Commission with your interests is gonna drive their activity to a certain extent, rather than just a reactive, how much is our contribution this year? So I think this whole process, even though there may be some growing pains, is gonna be helpful.
Well, I mean, it's just like the millage money. I know we expect Ms. Edson, the director of the parks, to come to us with a laundry list of things. Hey, here's what we want to spend the millage money on this year. Well, it might need to be more of a collaborative effort where we say, you know what, there's a few priorities that we see that, that entrance, we want to dress that up. Mr.
So
Mansur?
Supervisor Bennett, I think that's right, and I think that what we're trying to do here is to front-load that process with these. And so when we have Trustee Thomas sit in on our behalf and kind of bubble up those things, then we should hear from Director Edson echoing our input in there. But now we've at least given some feedstock to get into the front of that process.
Yeah.
If I might, it's approaching 8 o'clock here, and we've spent quality time, but that time on just one topic. And I'm just wondering if, and this is, I mean, it's been excellent discussion here. I'm just wondering if we might want to designate different months and maybe go through a couple of these topics in a little bit more in depth. So for instance, and we probably can't do streets and roads, but my thought was in July, the technology village and business attractiveness. I would be, by the way, I would be happy to, I'd be happy to chair that if you and if Trustee Massey are okay with that. I don't want to.
With the attractiveness?
Yeah, the business, I don't want to, overstep if someone has a real interest in
No,
that. But anyway, think about doing that in July, then the next two in August, and the next two in September, just to kind of get out in front of people what expectations are, and at least give us a chance to prepare a little bit for that. Just a thought.
I'd like to make a suggestion along with that, Supervisor Bennett. The ones that I think we should hit first would be the ones that need money allocated to them,
That's a great idea.
like
Okay.
Perry House.
Okay, Ms. Lane?
I was following what Trustee Mansur was saying. My combination, the only one different from you would be put Parks and Rec and the Perry House together, because those go together, and then streets and public works are more commonalities.
Maybe I'll try and thread the needle here a little bit. What if we were to do a combination? What if we asked, okay, and Mr. Adkins, we need to get with you on which task force you'd like to serve on, and a couple of them we'd like you to serve on, but maybe what we do is we ask the task forces over the next month to get together and to look at these things and prioritize them. And if there's something that's going to require some consideration for money or funding, that we be ready to bring that back to the board in the next month or so that Mr. Limata we can have some discussion as a board over expenditures for that. I know that the attractiveness, we've talked about some signage at entrances to the township, and we've got some things we could probably report on with that, some developments that we've been looking at.
There's one on that,
There's a few of them on it,
well,
actually, but-
MTA is thinking about putting a brick wall up to match Fenton and Hill Road, so
Yeah,
then we can go to the school board and
and we want to look at Fenton and Hill too, and maybe upgrade that, but So anyways, maybe if our task forces can meet in the next month, does that sound like something that is doable? And look at these priorities and just see if it's gonna require some funding, and if it is, bring that back to the board. But right now, we've got the list of our task forces, and Parks and Rec, we have myself, Mr. Mansour, and Mr. Thomas, which that's fine, I think. Streets and Road, right now we've got myself, Ms. Lane, Mr. Massey. On the Technology Village, we've got myself, Ms. Lane is asked to be on that. Mr. Atkins, would that be something that you might be interested in serving on?
Which one was that, I'm sorry?
The Technology Village?
Yes, I would.
Okay.
I'd also like to be part of Parks and Rec, if that's a possibility.
And I thought I was on Parks and Rec
Okay.
originally.
You're on,
You were removed and you didn't know I did.
Yeah,
you're on the Perry House.
yeah, but
Okay.
I was on
Wow.
more than one.
Supervisor.
I will again remind everybody, when we put 4 people on, we have to post.
We'll make it a public meeting, I guess, if we get 4 people, right?
Excuse me,
Mr. Laddie?
If you do, yeah, although,
Supervisor Bennett, if I can, I
Yes.
find myself on a number of these, and I would be willing to relinquish my spot to Trustee Atkins on the Parks and Rec.
I'll relinquish
And I
my
would too.
spot also.
No, I'll come
I'll
off
pick a
that as
different
well.
committee.
Now
So-
we have no
So
representatives.
we have Mr. Guzak, Mr. Thomas, and Mr. Atkins on Parks and Rec.
Okay.
I will chair that if that's okay with
on
you,
technology.
Supervisor.
Just a minute.
We'll let you individuals figure that out at your
All right.
meetings, as far as who will chair
Mr.
that.
Supervisor, you're
Yes.
taking yourself off, and
Mr.
Mr. Mansour
Mansour.
has asked to be taken off without, and it wasn't facetious.
No,
Right.
not facetious.
So
All
we'll let
right,
the
so
three
it's Thomas, Guzak, and Atkins.
Yes.
Okay.
And we'll let out, what we would suggest, I would suggest, is that you guys figure out who's gonna chair the meeting when you guys meet. But I don't really wanna get into that tonight, but, Technology Village, we've already gone through that.
How many do we have on there?
3.
Myself, Kathy, and Mr. Atkins, Ms. Lane, and Mr. Atkins. Business Attractiveness, we've got Mansour, Massey, and myself. Planning and Zoning, I don't know,
Yeah, that kind of
kind of
falls within
falls
the-
in a few of the others, but right now we've got myself and Mr. Mansour. Appearance and Appeal, Grand Blanc Township, I've got myself, Ms. Lane, Mr. Massey.
falls together, right?
Mr. Chair,
Yes,
at this point, we need to think about some funding for a sign out front.
for our sign, yes.
Yes,
So we need to
because
discuss that.
yes,
Okay, we'll
we
put
can
that on
allocate
future
some money for
positioning.
that.
And Mr. Leamich and I have had that discussion recently on that sign too, but, Perry Homestead, we've got, Mr. Thomas, Mr. Guzak, myself, and then, DPW, myself, which, Mr. Atkins, maybe you could be on that one as well, which I'm not sure that we're gonna need to meet a lot, but we have the property that we just purchased that we'll be looking at that and the plans for it, so. Okay, so if these task forces could meet, and I'd invite you to use conference call. There's a couple of services that are free for conference calling. You can probably do it on your cell phone if there's only 3 of you anyways, but, and I guess that's all we could do on a conference call is 3 people, because otherwise, unless you want to have Mr. Leamington and Mr. Laddie involved, then you can use one of the free conference call services.
Yeah,
Yes, sir.
Supervisor Bennett, I was actually thinking about engaging other people.
Outside of,
Outside of the board here in some of these activities, especially you can talk about business attractiveness. I mean, you want to actually talk to businesses. So I guess I kind of felt free to be able to include those people
I think, you mean for input or?
For input, yeah, just to formulate positions and formulate strategies.
As a member of the committee?
Well, at least input to the committee.
I think one of the things that, what I would suggest, and I understand the input from outside people, I would not encourage them necessarily to be part of the committee, but to give input to the committee.
So schedule something where they might come as a group and provide
Give
input as a
input.
one or two time thing and.
Yes,
Okay, fine.
because otherwise I think, I mean, this is board work that we want to prioritize things. And it's kind of like getting professional opinion on things so that you can formulate your suggestions back to the board. Because otherwise I can see these things turn into a few other issues in terms of why people weren't included.
Okay.
What have you. Ms. Lane?
That was part of our earlier discussion this year, that it is a board committee. You can ask for suggestions from outside people, but they are not members of the committee. And
Yeah,
they
it just
don't,
changes the dynamic. So for example, if I'm on a committee with Mr. Massey, Ms. Lane, myself, and I don't like the opinion of Mr. Massey and Ms. Lane, I get a couple of my buddies to be on the committee that side with me, and I overrule them.
that would be difficult. Right?
But the thought has
comment.
passed through my mind.
Some of the stuff that we talk about, you say, it's off the record, Ken, don't worry about it.
All right, could we move on with our agenda?
So anyways, with that, I think we're gonna schedule those meetings with your task force, and I know we have an executive session, but yes.
Supervisor Bennett, I will meet with the Perry Homestead group.
Task force.
The task force, and I will have the RFPs. Is that the correct terminology?
For the work that-
Kitchen and the soffits and such, and I will email them up to the board before we present it for next month's meeting.
All right. Okay, with that, I think that takes care of future agenda items for the board.
Yeah,
And,
that's enough.
Mr. Laddie?
We have a request for an executive session
on
to
the agenda?
discuss a potential employee agreement.
I don't see it on the agenda. Do you have, trustee Mansour?
Well, it was updated,
Oh, it
the
is.
agenda was updated, but,
So moved, Mr. Chair.
we don't, and just to clarify, we don't like, in fact, one of our our policies is that we don't like last minute things being added to the agenda. However, when it's of an urgent nature or financial issue, we like to, we add those if needed, and this is an issue that I think is fairly urgent. So with that, there's a motion, it was seconded. All those in favor?
Roll
Or-
call.
Go ahead, Ms. Lane.
Mr. Mansour,
Yes.
Mr. Thomas.
Yes.
Mr. Atkins.
Yes.
Mr. Guzak.
Yes.
Mr. Massey.
Yes.
Myself, yes, Mr. Chair.
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay.